I'll say it once and I'll say it again. I love quilting with scraps. Hi friends, welcome back to Karla Created. I'm Karla, and in this video I'm making another patchwork quilt. This one is for my 8-year-old daughter, and I took her to the fabric shop a few months ago and allowed her to pick out a few different fabrics that were on clearance, and combining some of the fabric that I've got in my stash with those ones that she picked out, I am making her a colourful quilt. When I'm making my quilts, I like to use all of the fabric in the quilt as best as I possibly can. So typically how I do this is by combining scrappy, sort of haphazard, mishmashed, crazy blocks with coordinated blocks that I have made using the bulk of the fabric, I guess. Now, the reason why I do this is because I am determined to reduce the amount of fabric that I have in my fabric stash. Now, this project, I already said that I bought new fabric, so I kind of feel like even more inclined not to put any remaining fabric back into my stash. I really want to use as much of it as I possibly can. Let's get started. Okay, let me show you the fabric that I am working with for this quilt. I have this lovely floral fabric. I then have this blue, is this blue? It's not blue. Purple fabric. Now I've already cut some of this out, so that's why there doesn't look like there's very much. But this purple sort of tie-dye fabric here. This fabric was also from my stash, and I realized that just looking at the selvage of this fabric, it was designed and made in 1996, which is just crazy because that's like almost 30 years old. I then have a combination of other fabrics. Now, I've already started cutting these fabrics out. So you'll see there's the purple that I just covered. I then have this blue, sparkly, sort of tie-dye cloud type print. This is one of the new ones that my daughter picked out. I also have some pastel-y, purpley, pink butterflies. Once again, also one of the newer fabrics that my daughter picked out. Pastel tie-dye, this one was also a new fabric. This was from my fabric stash, and it's probably about the same age as that purple one. I also have some very small scraps of this smaller floral print from my stash. A teensy bit of this like really soft grey cotton. I'm not sure how that will go because it's not the same type of cotton. It's quite sort of stretchy, but we'll see how I go with that one. And then finally, I have a very small amount of this blue linen. Now, I have cut most of the fabrics up into these 4.5-inch squares. I'll tell you my plan in a minute for what I'm going to do. Now, I've got this stack of scrap fabric leftovers. Now, because I was dealing with essentially fat quarters for most of the fabric, I've got some longer strips left over that I'm going to join together to make more blocks. I then have some smaller bits of fabric that I'm going to chain piece together to then also make up some patchwork blocks. So my plan for the quilt at this point in the process is to have those 4.5-inch squares that I'm cutting out on the point. Now, I've never made a quilt in this fashion before, so the method that I'm sort of depicting here is probably really unconventional. I'm planning to cut as many 4.5-inch squares out of the 6 fabric colorways that I have, and then stitch them in rows of varying lengths to achieve a big square, I guess. And then for the rest of the quilt, at this point in time, I was going to just do scrappy blocks. So have half in the on point 4.5-inch squares, and then the other half as scrappy blocks. That's not how it turns out, so you'll have to stay tuned to see what I actually achieve. How lucky are we?
So this is the first half of the quilt top, and I'm really wishing that I did some mathematical calculations to work out the finished size once all of the 4.5 inch squares were stitched together, because it's definitely not wide enough or obviously long enough to be a single bed quilt size, which is the size that I am aiming for, or at least a lap quilt, which it's also not big enough for either. But never fear, the Scrappy patching is about to begin, which is the super fun part of this project. So you'll see me here piecing and then cutting a whole bunch of different fabrics in sort of coordinated colorways to keep with the same colorway sequence of the blocks that I've been putting together thus far. And this was the most fun. Like, I love scrap piecing. I just think it's the best fun ever. And it also adds more interest to the finished quilt, in my opinion. So yeah, that's all I'm doing here is I'm using up as much as my scrap to create a whole bunch more 4.5 inch blocks.
Hello friends, I'm back. This quilt's taking me such a long time. I have now made up enough blocks by just piecing together some of the scraps. This is how many scraps I still have left. Quite a bit. Stay tuned for that. I have placed the blocks out in the order of sequence that they go in, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a whole nother top, like another part to the top that's the same as what I've already made. So I'm going to do the chain piecing a little bit differently now than what I did first time round. I'm literally going to just chain all of these together. I've got 15 of each because that's how many I need for the rest of the quilt top. And then I will attach one by one to those. That's what I'm doing. So I'm going to get crack-a-lackin' with that and just have some fun piecing together everything. What do you like about it?
I like the butterflies, and I like how it's like really silky.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, it's going to be big. It's going to be like a whole bed, like single bed size. It's pretty cool, hey? I'm so glad you like it.
I love it.
Can't wait for you to see when it's finished. It's a Saturday morning. I am still in my pajamas and I have been scrapping away making blocks because I completely miscalculated how many of these I actually needed in each color. Anyway, it's been fun. It's been a bit of a mental math kind of mind bender. I have been using through the scraps, so we are making progress. I have 2 more like strips to do, and then I can finish the second half of the quilt top and then trim it and then attach them together. This is so unconventional. Any professional quilters out there are probably watching this going, what the hell is she doing? Look, I don't even know at this point. I'm just winging it, as with most things. Anyway, let's keep cracking on. I'm still in my pajamas. I didn't get changed because I decided that today was going to be a pajama day. I had a big week and I feel like I'm getting sick, so I'm just gonna potter in my PJs. And I'm like so determined to get the second half of the quilt top stitched together.
You're probably asking yourself, why did she not just do, HSTs on, one end of each of those strips? Yeah. I realized that this was probably what I should have done when I was roughly at this point in the process. Hey, look, you live and you learn.
It's a new day and I'm still in my pajamas. Different pajamas. Anyway, I feel like I'm just in my pajamas for like 90% of most of my quilting videos. Oh, I'm being beckoned. Here is where I am at with the quilt. This whole project has been a mathematical and geometrical, if that's even a word, disaster, fiasco? Fiasco is what I was about to say. Anyway, I have not made it wide enough. It is very narrow. It is long enough for a single bed, but it is not wide enough. So I need to add approximately 10 inches. So I'm aiming for 5 on either side, so then it's nice and balanced. And I have been debating for the last couple of hours how I am going to do that because I am running on very limited fabric. So I've got a few options. So let's bring you down here with me. I can make Scrappy HST blocks out of the little triangle offcuts that I cut to square up the quilt top. So I could do that, but I'm probably still not going to have enough of those to border both sides of the quilt. I also have a little pile of sort of random scrappy bits. Still, probably not enough, but I could probably use all of that up and make like a scrappy kind of border situation. I have these two sort of smaller pieces. Don't think there will be enough here either. So I'm thinking perhaps I could do a combination of scrappy blocks, HST squares, and some sort of solid, well this is a sort of solid, this isn't, but like bigger pieces just of these two colors to do the sides. Yes. I might just wing it, much like I do everything else. I'm just gonna wing it and we'll see what happens and see what designs I can come up with. This morning when I enjoy my coffee and I'm going to just stitch these HSTs together in a random fashion. I'm just gonna stitch these together and have my coffee and have a really fun time. And then iron them all flat and square them up. Let's do that. Yeah. I wonder if I can use up all of the fabric that I have left in the quilt somehow. Let's give it a crack. Alrighty, I stitched together all of those triangles and then I pressed them and trimmed off the little excess bit on the corners. And then what I have been doing is going through the scrap fabric that I have left over, and I have just been chain piecing those HST blocks to bits of scrap to make them bigger, because what I want to do is I want to get blocks that are 5 by 5 because that's my size of my ruler, and I'm going to make strips 5 inch and 5 inch down either side of the quilt top that I've already constructed. So I have just been stitching scraps, chain stitching scraps. How cool is this? That actually looks so cool, just like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take them all to my ironing board, just like this, as they are, and I'm going to iron and separate them simultaneously, just because I think that will be more efficient. I'm going to make a cup of tea and take that with me whilst I get that done. And then I will come back and I will, what I'll do is just, so imagine this piece here, this thin strip, I'll add another piece to the top, almost like a log cabin block. I think that's what it's called, where you do a strip on one side and then you do a strip on the top and then you do a strip on the side again and another strip. Well, all the way around, sorry, the central square, which will be this. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna keep on keeping on. I'll say it once and I'll say it again. I love quilting with scraps. I have trimmed down all of these Scrappy blocks and they are all various sizes at the moment. So you've got some that are like this, others that are quite a bit shorter. So I have my work cut out for me, a couple of hours probably, to stitch more fabric to these to make them this size. I have taken the liberty of going through my fabric stash to see what I have for the backing of this quilt and also the binding. I don't want to buy any more fabric. I have so much fabric that I have acquired and I need to use it because it's just taken up space. So I have found this awesome fabric that is perfect for this particular quilt. Not only does it match, but it also has little sweet dreams written on it. It's awesome. And I have so much of this, like there is easily enough to back this quilt and potentially another one at some point. Once again, I didn't buy this. I acquired this from Nana Deli. Shout out to you, Nana Deli, if you're watching. I am using the fabric you gave me. Thank you so much. And I think you also gave me this one too. This just plain pink, sort of very, very subtly striped cotton. Now this is already sort of cut into some strips of varying lengths. So I'm thinking that I'm just going to use these and do a very narrow binding on this quilt. Something probably like that, which I will machine stitch on potentially. I'm not sure. I love hand stitching, but I've been working on this quilt for quite some time and I really am at the point now where I want to just get it done so that I can start my next Scrappy quilt project. So yeah, I'm going to use up as much of this fabric from my stash that I can as well, which I'm really excited about, and that will be the backing and the binding. So yeah, but I really should finish the blocks first.
So I've used up all of the smaller bits of my scrap fabric. So now I'm onto those 2 larger bits of fabric to finish off these Scrappy blocks. And all I did was just stitch the bits of scrap to the long edge of the larger piece of fabric, and then I awkwardly cut them out, which was actually really difficult to do. And I don't know why I did this. I just assumed that it would save me some time and, more importantly, save some fabric, because I really didn't want to generate any more scraps by cutting more of this fabric than what I needed to, if that makes sense. So here we go. Majority of the scrap blocks are now done, and I stitched them all together into 2 evenly lengthed rows to go down either side of the quilt top. Next up, I needed to get my quilt sandwich prepared. So I got my backing piece prepped and ready to go, and my wadding piece cut to size as well to make my quilt sandwich. I then embarked on the very lengthy quilting process, which absolutely killed my T-Rex arms, as you see here.
I am almost halfway done with quilting, and I just really love the quilting pattern that I decided to do. Yeah, it's making me really happy. It's gonna look really cool, I think. It's gonna take me a little bit longer, but I can see that the fruits of my labor are starting to pay off, and I love it. It's so cool. It really just makes the quilt top pop and the design stand out, which was what I was going for. And yeah, I'm so stoked. It's going really, really well, and I haven't had any puckering on the underside yet, touch wood. So yeah, I'm very happy, very pleased. This is probably going to take me the entirety of the afternoon though to finish quilting, which is, I guess that's just how it is.
I realized that those pre-cut strips that I had in the binding fabric were not going to be wide enough. So I decided to cut slightly wider strips of fabric and make my own binding. Now this is a really straightforward process. You essentially just make strips of fabric and fold them in half and iron them. It's as simple as that. all I need to do now is stitch on my binding, which is really easy and quite an enjoyable process because it's one of the final steps of this quilt, which is taking a very long time. While I'm at it, I thought I'd give you a bit of a close-up as to how I do my corners. It's quite straightforward. I just stop when I get to a corner, take it out of the needle. You don't have to, but I find it easy just to create that 90-degree fold before I restart the new edge. Creates a nice, clean, crisp corner, which I really like.
The quilt is finished and I feel so relieved.
Here it is in all its glory. I always add a Karla Created label to my quilts so then I remember that I made them. And you'll see here that the quilting lines that I did follow the geometric pattern of each colorway. So it forms like an L in a corner. It's hard to explain. I hope you can see it, but I wanted to point that out because I'm really proud of that design on this quilt. And what's most important is my daughter absolutely loves it.
That was by far the biggest quilting project that I have done. Biggest in terms of size. I did a full single size quilt and I've never made a quilt that big before. They've all been lap quilts or like, you know, couch throw type quilt size. I really enjoyed the making process for this quilt. I love that it reduced some of the fabrics in my stash. Used all the fabric that I bought that my daughter picked, the clearance fabric, and then I still have a little bit of fabric that I took out of my stash and put back into my stash. Overall though, it was a success in terms of using things up, so I'm really happy with that. I hope you liked this video and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What did you like about it? I really hope that this video brought you joy. That's what I'm all about here at Karla Created, spreading creative joy and inspiration. I get a lot of joy out of making these projects and sharing them with the world. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe to my channel and I will see you in the next video. Bye.